record now. There we go, run the recording. And I'm just going to, yeah, I think I've got all of my bits and pieces now to share. Okay, let's hope this is a much more smoother broadcast for everybody. Okay, so welcome back. Thank you very much indeed. I just want to catch up with, I think I'm just going to keep a check on the participant box. I think everybody is in. Yeah, we're fine. Fantastic. All right. Okay, guys. Right, let's just go to the chat and just go back to any feedback during lunch. Okay, right. Okay, so yes. Okay, training. I mean, if this is new to everybody in terms of looking at phonics, then it is basically, it is a whole day training course, and that's what ETF have done. They've put on whole day training courses. It may be something that you may want to have a chat with your managers there, because we do have, on behalf of ETF, a developing readers and writers course. There's one for entry-level students, and there's one for entry 2 and entry 3. And particularly colleagues who are teaching spiky profile level 1, level 2 learners, the entry 2, entry 3 course might be quite helpful. Okay, so that training is also available. It's also available through the webinars as well, because, I mean, we're all doing a 5-day course here, but ETF also do half-day courses and also whole-day courses. So if this is something that you might need further training in, then please do, you know, chase that up with your managers, because ETF do offer specific courses on post-16 phonics. What I would say, guys, if that's not possible, with the greatest respect, then please do look at those documents, the ones that I showed in the first half of this training, and I've also inserted into the Padlet as well. So do have a look at the appendix section of the DFE subject content for Functional Skills English. You'll get all the reading lists there and all the writing lists as well. And also, please do take your time and dip into the post-16 phonics toolkit. There are some real gems in there. I would say just have a little look at the case studies and maybe start from there. And then from there, then you can go into more of the specifics around some of the phonics concepts that are mentioned in some of those case studies, rather than trying to digest absolutely everything about phonics. All right, so that would be the way to go. And as I said before, for me personally, in terms of how I place phonics in my teaching, is I make it very learner-centered. I go with what learners can read and what they can write, and what their strengths are and what their limitations are as well. And based on that intelligence, I then plan my sessions accordingly. And then I pipeline in, or I drip feed phonics-based work into my teaching. Phonics-based work has always been part of my English language teaching for the last 20 years, okay? And I'm not saying we have to become experts at it, but, you know, having a reasonably sound knowledge on phonics, I think would be extremely helpful with the kind of work that you are doing with your learners in your college. Okay, so other comments about resources? Yeah, fantastic. You'll also find there are some further resource links as well. I mean, the other thing I want to mention about resources is there are, you know, specific reading schemes available for primary education. I'm thinking of one that I've used, you know, for private clients in terms of Oxford. Oxford do a really good one for children. And you may well find that some of the methodologies and the thinking behind how the primary school phonics resources, you know, how they are, you may well find some ideas within those. But obviously, as I said, be very, very careful about using some of the primary school context. Obviously, it all depends. I mean, for example, if you are teaching students who are on a nursery nursing type course, and the phonics was part of helping the children to read, then maybe those resources might be helpful to as a way of exposing phonics to those students. So it all depends. It's kind of, you know, horses for courses. And some other comments then. Yeah, absolutely, about the phonics components. Very helpful for reading and writing. Some comments there about might be well worth dictating a short passage to the group. Then they have a standard measure for everyone. in terms of any phonetic hang-ups. Everyone could redraft it into their teaching. Absolutely, you know, do have a look at your existing resources, lesson plans, and see how this could be put in there. Reuse the same passage with SPAG errors. Absolutely, I'm a big fan of getting learners to use consciousness raising skills to be able to do error correction on SPAG. So I'm all for one, giving learners examples of text with spelling errors, punctuation errors, grammatical errors, and then using a variety of annotation techniques, whether they're circling words, if they are highlighting in different colors, if they're putting big arrows away, if they're writing summary notes, big massive brackets, you know, for learners to really work with the text. And again, the SPAG work, I believe the SPAG, particularly the spelling part of the SPAG, works hand in hand with doing more work on phonics. Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Josh, about the human beings comment. Okay, so you did have some phonics training at the college last year. Amazing, fantastic, brilliant stuff. So again, it may well be worth going back on some of that material as well in terms of planning your teaching moving forward. Okay, then, right. So we're going to have a little look now at entry-level work with students in terms of reading and writing. And this is a very important area in functional skills, particularly with, as you've already said in the beginning, lots of learners, level 1, level 2, may have spiky profiles. They may have reading and writing skills at entry 3. Can I just ask a question? Which seems to be the biggest problem with your you know, those who are spiking into entry level? Is it more of the writing that's the issue, or is it reading, or is it both? So I'm just thinking of your spiky students who are registered for level 1, level 2. We all know it's going to be a challenge to hopefully get them through their level 1, level 2, but which skill seems to be giving them the most difficulty? And for you as well, the most challenges as a teacher? Right, we're saying, oh my God, you know, when, in terms of the frequency and the speed of the notes, everyone's saying writing, 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 writing. Right, Liz, you're saying some mostly reading. Okay, that's fine. Vicky, the same as well. Natasha, depends on the student. Yeah, all right, fantastic. All right, thank you very much. Absolutely. Yeah, so really, in terms of, if we focus on entry level 3, I know some of you may be doing entry 1, entry 2, and we will cover some aspects of entry 1, entry 2. Entry 3 is a pivotal level because eventually we want our E1s on E2s to get to entry level 3. It's a pivotal point as part of the student's learning journey in English. If, for example, they haven't got their GCSE, they're having to do functional skills, and we tend to find that entry 3 is a very, very interesting springboard to level 1, to level 2. So it is, for me, it's my go-to entry level, okay, entry level 3. And I want, even my entry 1s, entry 2s, I do want them to do snippets of entry 3 because I want to get them ready. I don't just want to get them, if they're doing entry 2, I don't just want to get them through entry 2. I want them to be able to be ready to tackle entry 3, which is why some of the skills that are now part and parcel of the new subject specs for entry 3, for me as a practitioner, they do need to transcend into entry level 2 teaching as well. Now, the same goes for level 1 the old level 1 legacy going into entry level 3. For example, understanding the main points of the text. So understanding the main purpose. This was an old level 1 legacy criterion. Now it's moved down to entry level 3 now. And I'm going to go through some teaching notes that I've created on how I would approach the actual teaching of this for entry 3s who may struggle. And you know, when we're working with entry 3 students, if they're registered for entry 3, some of their spiky profiles may even go down all the way to E1, maybe pre-entry as well. It just depends on the individual student. All right. So, you know, I've worked with entry 3 students, ESOL students who are pre-entry / entry 1 speaking and listening. So it all depends. So what is being assessed at reading at entry level 3? Understand the main points of a text, obtain specific information from detailed reading, use organizational features to locate information and read text in different formats, and also read correctly words designated for entry 3 as per the DFE subject content for functional skills English, which we showed earlier in the training session in the morning. Also identify and extract main points in and from text, identify different purpose of straightforward text, and use effective strategies to find the meaning of words. So text in terms of instructional text, informative text, there may well be there may well be some adverts as well for them to be looking through as well. And so really it's about, do they understand what the main purpose actually is? And basically, guys, when you look at what's being assessed at entry level 3 here, are there any there that really are a real challenge for your students, even though they're spiky profiled, they're level 1, level 2, spiky profiled entry 3 readers, but there's 1 or 2 of them or all of them that's going to be an issue? Is there one that really sticks out for you guys, that this was a big challenge with my spiky profile students leaning towards E3? Yeah, find the meaning of words. Yeah, thank you, Shirley. Yeah, meaning making is really important. Yeah, okay, right. So in terms of the actual semantics, in terms of meaning, in terms of meanings of words, do any of you guys use semantic fields for teaching reading entry 3? Semantic fields. So what I mean by that, you just like put like a topic word like family or fruit, and then students then kind of look at words which actually belong to that particular group. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, really good. Thank you, Ross. Yeah, semantic fields are really good. And again, it builds up students' comprehension skills. But also in terms of meaning making is really important. We are going to do a bit more of a deep dive in this when we go to the level, we're looking at level 1, level 2 reading skills on Tuesday. But meaning making is important because we've got to make sure that our learners understand the language that we're presenting to them. The worst thing we can do, unwittingly so obviously, is if we are presenting them with text that they don't really understand what it's about, what the purpose is, and then again, it can lead to disengagement in some shape or form. And so it's so important for them to make meaning. Okay, now again, for me personally, I always like to have words. Well, for example, if there are keywords that are in a text which give the main purpose, or there are words that really I know my learners will struggle, I will probably use those words to maybe introduce a session. I may, for example, put them up as, you know, as they walk in, I'll have them presented as what we would call, you know, anagrams. So they just have to, like, you know, they're all the spelling is all confusing and they have to sort them out. I may put letter tiles in there for them to make those words. I may just arrange them with the incorrect spelling. I may also present words with pictures, so they have to then connect the words with the pictures. I may show them a short video, and then I may give them 5 or 10 words, and then I'm asking them to define what the words mean from watching the video. Okay, so it could be a news broadcast. It could be something that's quite topical, something that's uppermost. Okay, and so I'd be making sure that I'd be, you know, doing something a bit creative, just to get them thinking about things, making the meanings. Okay. And also, and again, you know, this is something that, again, every tutor's got their own view on this in terms of using dictionaries in class, and also using multilingual or bilingual dictionaries, or using IT to help students understand and decode words. So for example, would it, I mean, in your sessions, would students be able to use dictionaries? Can they use bilingual dictionaries to find the meanings of words? Are they able to just dip into Google and just put the word in, you know, meaning of whatever it is, and then it comes up? Or they can go on Wikipedia. Are all these things acceptable? Are they all allowable within your classes, just to help students to find the meanings, and also allow the students to do it themselves, you know, in terms of triggering that intrinsic motivation? For me, motivation is intrinsic and extrinsic. And we have to make sure, well, for me personally, in terms of my teacher talking time with the learners, that I'm not just using extrinsic motivation to motivate them, but I'm also allowing them to be able to find out things for themselves, okay? In terms of discovery learning, okay? So, oh, wonderful, Vicky. I have a hairdressing dictionary, but it helps. Why not? Whatever works. Brilliant. Like that. I love things like that. Thank you, Vicky. Paula's saying, yeah, I get them to have a dictionary in every session, but obviously they're not allowed to use it in the, obviously there are kind of rules around the use of dictionaries for the exams. But as a study model, it's another exposure. They are learning from other sources as well, in terms of meaning making. And also in terms of meaning making, I don't know whether any of you, I mean, again, with face-to-face classes, do any of you get your learners to sit behind each other, physically behind each other? And then you have one facing the board, looking at words, and the other person is behind. Have you done something called back-to-back vocabulary? I'm probably giving you an example of activity that I've always used in face-to-face teaching for meaning making at entry level. But I don't know how you could do it digitally. You probably could, but maybe using Zoom breakout groups. Okay, right. With back to back, what I would do, and again, this is on for me. This is a face-to-face teaching example. All right, I would have some keywords which will eventually find themselves in a text. This is the beginning of a lesson. You know, my pre-task. You know, get them engaged, get the schematic knowledge up and running, and everything. And basically, I'll put them in pairs, or if you've got odd numbers, you can have two sitting behind one student. But one student must be facing the board, and the other student or the other two students are immediately behind, facing behind, and they can't see the board. And what you would do as a teacher, or what I would do, is I know that there's these 10, 15 words that cover the main purpose, the significant rich words, which can then form into the main purpose, or there may be words I know my students will struggle with, okay? What I would do is I would then show the words alongside some pictures. So the learner, what they could do, the learner who is looking at the board, what they do then is they have to then come up with the meaning of the word by looking at the word and looking at the picture. And the student or students behind have to use active listening skills to be able to find out what the word is. So you have one student making the meaning, and then the making the meaning is then passed on to the other student. They listen to them making the meaning, and then they come up with the word. So you have the word and making the meaning working interchangeably in a highly interactive activity. And what you could then do is then you could then swap them around. Okay, so you have new words, and then the other person who was meaning making, they are now seated behind, and then they have to guess. All right, there's lots and lots of rich action going on there. There's lots of things that are happening. It's a very simple activity, but very effective. So I'm not quite sure how you would do it digitally. If anyone's got any ideas, brilliant. But it's something that you may want to do. It's brilliant also. I mean, not just for meaning making for entry 3 teaching, but also for just allowing learners to just review the main content of the previous lesson, okay? So if there's something that you want them to preview, you know, because it may be important, or maybe you ask them to do a flipped learning activity, you ask them to do some, well, dare I use the word homework, but maybe some extension activity, you ask them to do some research, you want them to, you know, to feed back, and then, you know, you could do something similar there as well. Right, okay, now with that, Josh, okay, what happens is that you've got everybody doing this. So the whole class is split into pairs. And I tend to find that you do this, if you've got an odd number, like you're left with a group of 3, then try to repeat the rounds 3 times. So everybody gets the chance to then do the actual meaning making. So what I might do is I might do a demonstration with another student first, so they get the activity, and then I get everyone to do it. Now, at this point, when you get everyone to do it, you're going to get lots of noise going on. So there's going to be lots of interaction going on. But the students have to try to cut through that and listen to the partner. but I've never really found any problems with managing this particular activity. It seems to work. Absolutely, yeah. So you get everyone to do it. Everybody does that. And what you could also do as well is you may want to use it as a revision technique as well. Have I gone through the Feynman technique already? Have I discussed the Feynman technique? Because this is an example of the Feynman technique. Have I gone through? I'm sorry I'm asking the question, guys, because I run so many webinars from home, but nationally. So did I go through it? All right. Did I go through the Feynman technique? Okay, all right. So particularly if the words have been part of a class that you already taught and you're using as a revision, then by virtue of the learners engaging in speaking and listening, that one's transferring their understanding and from their memory through the use of language to the other person, that is use of the Feynman. That is the last part of the Feynman technique, using the verbal recount to activate their memory from what they've been taught. Okay? Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Shirley. Just that I just teach so many groups and I'm not sure I've covered things or not. All right, okay. Now, how many of your students, okay, now because level 1, at the old legacy level 1, where learners had to identify the main purpose, but now entry level 3, put a yes or a no. How many of your entry 3, well, learners with entry 3 reading and writing skills, so I'm talking about registered entry 3, registered level 1, level 2. So how many of your learners with entry level 3 reading skills, you know, are going to struggle with trying to understand the main purpose of a text? Yes or no? Yes, they will struggle. No, they will not. So these are entry 3 students. These are students who are entry level 3 skills. Some will struggle 50-50. Some will struggle. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, guys. Okay. Right. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop this particular share. Yeah. Okay. Come on, Sunil. Don't mess up this time. We're still recording, yes? Can somebody please be my monitor and check that the recording button is still switched on? Okay. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Right. Okay. I don't know why that happens. I didn't want everything else. Oh, dear. Okay. Ah, here we go. Right. Okay. I don't know why. Sorry, guys. What it is, I've got all of my documents up, and so they're all registering on the screen share. But when I select the one that I actually want, and if it's further down the line, all the others come up first. And this is what I struggle with in the morning. So I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Maybe Zoom is overloaded. Okay, everybody, can you all see my teaching notes on entry level 3? Yes? Anyone can't see it? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, all right, okay. Now, I develop my own resources, not just for training, but also, you know, training colleagues, but also teaching students as well. So what I had to do for a conference is I had to come up with some teaching notes, and this is a good 4 or 5 months ago. But again, you know, and probably since then, you've probably got lots more sample questions that have been put on by the different AOs. I believe you're doing City and Guilds. Yeah. All right. Okay. So what I do, well, what I did on this particular project is I actually created some teaching notes. Okay. Now the kinds of notes that you may well find in, say, a textbook, and then from a textbook, what you do is you normally take the bits and pieces you want. I want this bit for my scheme and work, that for my lesson plan, this for a formative assessment, that for a progress test, this for a teaching resource. And this is how I've presented it. So I've done one for entry 3 English reading, identifying the main purpose, and I've done one for complex sentences level 1. But that one I'm going to go through in Tuesday's session when we look at level 1, level 2 teaching functional skills. All right, guys. So the main purpose of this is really to take teachers down a particular pipeline and how you can get entry 3 learners who are at entry level 3. in terms of their level, to help and support them to identify the main purpose of the text. So this has been taken, this particular text has been taken from an entry 3 reading paper, and this is from a sample OCR question. Okay, so I've literally just taken it from there, and it's quite topical. It's about mobile phones, good or bad. This is a typical functional skills type text. All right, and then what I've also done is I've put the actual text from the exam paper and also the actual exam question. So the question will state, what is the main purpose of this magazine article? Is it A, it describes the benefits of online shopping? Is it B, it helps people to found family and friends? C, it persuades people not to own a phone? Or D, it warns about the dangers to health of mobile phones? Okay, so if I was teaching entry 3 and I wanted to get this across to my students, then I'd be obviously looking at the resources and then making sure I'm clear about what the activity is, and then I can then start to then do a thought shower on all the ways that I could then create a pipeline to help get all the necessary underpinning knowledge and skills across to my learners. So by the end of that pipeline, they will understand what main purpose is. They will also know how to find it, and more importantly, to get the correct one. Okay, so here we go. So I would use a kind of a task-based model where I'd be doing lots of pre-task work. Now, tasks are very different from doing, little activities, because tasks are very overarching. There could be many dimensions and also elements within them. Students could be expected to do quite a lot to complete a task. Examples in functional skills would be for them to take part in a whole presentation exercise, to take part in a whole discussion-based activity, to be able to read a whole piece of text, to be able to write the whole letter, to be able to write the whole email. So these are tasks. They're quite meaty. There's a lot in them. But I know that a lot of my students would not be able to do the task ordinarily. They need various steps. They need little activities, incrementally sequenced, but maybe increasing in difficulty, which eventually help them to realize the end task at the end. So I like to do lots of pre-task activities to activate their own pragmatic schematic knowledge. That way then I can then get them to come with me on a journey and then improve their learning throughout, and hopefully that they'll be able to become much more confident and resilient in whatever I'm actually teaching them with. So again here, this is really important that, for me, probably to try and encourage learners to use their skills of prediction by just giving them the title. I mean, have you ever started off a reading lesson by just giving them the title for them to predict what the rest of the text might be about? Yes or no? Anybody use prediction? Yeah. Yes, Joe, it should be. That's a good point. I will double check. I think it might be there. I will double check. Thank you, Joe. That's good. Yeah, but more for writing. Thank you, Shirley. That's fine. No problem, Natasha. That's fine. Okay. For me, it's a very, very powerful tool. Okay. Asking learners to predict, you get them straight into their subconscious mind, which is, for me, 85% of their mind, which is where they start to reason. It's where they start to create. Okay, so by asking them to predict, you're asking them to create a hypothesis. Okay, a hypothesis is this article is about this, or it's about that. Okay, by asking him to predict, and it's a very powerful technique to use, and I always use it when I'm teaching reading. I never ever, and this is me as a practitioner, I never ever show the whole text at the beginning. Never. Always try to drip feed it, but I do get them to do it. And when I do get them to use the text, then we do lots of stretch and challenge with the text once I've got them into the text mindset. Okay, but this is about mindset. This is about getting them slowly into the context, into the theme. They're also connecting with their own experience about mobile phones. You may want to have a discussion with them, okay, about mobile phones and what they think about them. And you could ask a funny question like, put your hands up if you haven't got a mobile phone. Something like that. Something funny, humorous. It always works as well. You know, it's I think humor is good. I think humor and laughter is a recognition of learning. So, you know, please don't mind my sense of humor, but I do incorporate it a lot in my training and my teaching. And it does help. It does help. It helps with trying to understand something in a different way, in a humorous way, which can actually do the trick. Okay, the actual light bulb moment might come from humor. And then what I would do is, again, pre-task. I'd give them like a card sort, where what I'm doing is I'm going to ask them to give them these statements, and they have to separate them. Do you think these are bad things that to do with mobile phones or good things? And I think entry 3 learners would like this. Learners with entry 3 skills would like to, you know, be working with things, reading it, you know, trying to understand it, check with their partner, and then try and match them together. Now, if you did this digitally, I mean, in the classroom, you have the cards ready and you give them the title cards, and then they then work together or on their own, and then they just put the good column and then the bad column. Digitally, I know sometimes, I mean, I've got Active Inspire, you know, the Promethean board software that you use on a proper interactive Promethean smart board. I would normally use the text feature, and then I'd type out all my phrases. Then I would get the learners to come to the board, work together, and try to put them in the right way. Or I would be the one holding the pen, and they, through their instructions, they would guide me as to where I'd put them. But I've got it downloaded on my laptop, and I screen share it with my students so they can do the matching, but doing it electronically. So if there's any other software out there that you use, then just please do write it in the chat box. That might be really helpful for everybody else, okay? Because, you know, sometimes we are restricted if we are teaching purely on a digital platform. But again, it shouldn't hold us back, okay? Now, at this point, my students then, okay, I've predicted, we got them to do prediction, right? Brilliant. They're getting some semblance of, good and bad, mobile phones. I know about that. They've done the matching activity. Now, at this point, I want them now to go into the different purposes of text. Is it to persuade? Is it to instruct? Is it to inform? Is it to describe? At this point in the lesson, I want my learners to show to me that they understand what purpose of the text is, and also examples. So I'd give them a matching activity here. Okay, so from card sorts, from prediction to card sorts to matching. And again, I'm getting them to use a subconscious part of their minds to have a look and see. Okay, so they would basically draw arrows. Okay. And then what I would do is I'd give them a definition of purpose of a text, okay? But I would use it as a gap fill. Now, either you use it as a handout, a worksheet for them to complete, or you could have it up on the main screen and then they do it as a whole class, okay? Now, using the interactive whiteboard, using Active Inspire, it's also nice that the students themselves can come to the board and they can click the word text. They physically move it, and then they work with fellow students to find out where it best fits. That's amazing if you can do that. I mean, obviously, you do that in the class, but in terms of digitally, then that's something you might need to look at, okay? But I would use, I'm using Active Inspire to do that. And then you would show them the full definition, and then you would highlight, underline the key words. And again, sometimes I don't know what your thoughts are, guys, on reading aloud. Do you get your learners to read aloud in class? Yes or no? Come on. Drag and drop, brilliant. Yeah, drag and drop show is brilliant. Great direct, thank you. Thanks, Joe. Great stuff. They're never willing, Josh. Oh no. Josh, can I teach your learners? Honestly, I'm being serious. You know, when I volunteer that to colleagues, they always say, yes, when are you coming? Yesterday? Okay. Other colleagues are saying, yes, but they won't. Yeah, okay, all right, okay. Now, this one, I do want to talk about reading aloud a little bit for entry level, all right? Because I mentioned that I wear several hats as a freelance consultant trainer, and I do lots of, I really enjoy the work. I enjoy all my work. I really enjoy working in the schools as an English speaking board ESB examiner. And at the moment we're doing the exams through video conferencing now, all right? And essentially every single ESB exam, whether they are 3 years old or 18, they have to read aloud, all right? So you can tell now how the phonics comes into independent school teaching, because phonics can be really helpful to help learners to make connections, build their confidence, and then shout it out, okay? I personally, what I do is I always read the text aloud. Whatever text I'm giving, I always read it aloud, because I want my students to receive a model of reading so they can then either use aspects of it or maybe copy it if necessary, all right? But I want them to be exposed to a way of reading the text I'm giving them to read, right? Because that is another powerful exposure that for me, that the students need. And I know from my own experience of working as an ESB live examiner, nearly every single teacher who teaches ESB would say, you wouldn't believe, Sunil, how confident my learners are once I get them to read aloud, or whether they stand up and they speak, something that just gets them out of their chair, gets them out of their voices, get their voices out. They go through a bit of a struggle with confidence and reticence, but once they do it, they've actually gone over a mountain. So for their resilience building, it's been amazing, and their confidence. So even if, say for example, Josh, if I was teaching in your class, if I took over your class, Josh, what I would do, I'd say, right, I'm going to read this, and I'd like a volunteer to read it back, please. Can I have the volunteer, please? Come on. Which one of you are brave? Come on then, Jack. Come on, you're the one, yeah? So I would read it, and then Jack repeats. Hopefully, by Jack reading it, the peer-peer influence will also encourage your Michelle or Chloe or Mohammed or Pramjit to read it as well. Okay, it's got to start somewhere, but trust me, guys, reading aloud is a very underrated skill. And me, because I do what I do, I always try to promote things. I've worked so well in other sectors, and I'm just saying, guys, just give it some thought in post 16. If you think it might work, it may not, but seriously, if you read something aloud, you know, it helps with you're also transferring the language into your subconscious mind, and you're trying to trigger, oh, maybe that word is linked to this, that, and the other. So it works very well with processing of the language through the subconscious mind into triggering previous memories or thoughts or previous knowledge, and it might help them to understand the text. Lots of ESB teachers said, getting my pupils to read aloud helps them to understand the text. Okay, so this is something so fantastic, so brilliant. Okay, guys, we're getting some really good comments here. Make them read each piece of written work and peer assess. Brilliant stuff, Paula. Honestly, it's all great stuff. This is the thing, you know, get the learners to be active, because I know that my post 16 learners, depending on how they've been taught in the past, some of them may come in with preloaded passivity, that then they're not going to be active because that's the way they've been taught in the past. We have to bring them slightly out of themselves by doing things like this. All right then, guys. So now my students understand what the purpose is. They've gone through different types of the different purpose of different text. They've had some information about the mobile phones. Now at this point, I'm just going to pose 4 options to them, okay? And I'm going to say to them that I'm going to show you a text and some questions, and then here are the 4 options I want you to consider, okay? Which one do you think the text might be about? So again, further prediction. So A, B, C, or D, you know, it may well be their own pragmatic knowledge, may pull them towards one direction, but at least I'm exposing it to them to get them to think. And if I can start to form new hypotheses in their heads, hypotheses can unwittingly help to motivate them to read. And the reason is this, is once you allow them to form their own hypothesis by using their subconscious part of their mind, they have a reason for reading. And the reason is this, that my teacher has given me a hypothesis, a question now. As I'm reading it, I am going to make sure I actually try to approve or disprove that hypothesis, okay? Which is why I'm a big fan of prediction, okay? Get your learners to predict. Now, at this point, what you could do is with the text, you don't have to show them fully the text like this, like I'm about to show you. But what you could do is you could use DARTS activities, which are directed activities related to text. So it's a kind of a training acronym. And essentially, you get, with DARTS style, you always get them to do something with the text. So it may well be that you may give them, you may split the text into 10, maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 pieces, and then you give it to each, to a pair, one piece to a pair, and the learner have to physically get up out of their chairs. This is for face-to-face teaching, and they have to align themselves. So from the left-hand side of the classroom, which is the start of the text, and then you then get them. Then the ones who are, you know, holding the ending of the text, they're going to be on the other side of the classroom. So you got them all standing adjacent to each other in pairs, holding their piece of text. You could then get them to read aloud and see, and then everybody agrees if it sounds cohesive. If not, let the students move around themselves. So by the end of that activity, again, you're using the visual kinesthetic, using lots of multiple intelligences with this one. Then hopefully by them self-correcting as a group, then they've got the whole text in front of them. Okay, so that is a really good activity. And again, what you could do, if you wanted to, you could use the active inspire thing again. You can put pieces of the text in sentences and get them to move it around and see if they can make a cohesive text, okay? Or if you wanted to, you could give them the text, which is unsegmented, all right? So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. Give the text unsegmented and get them to segment it. And you could say, and if you want to do stretch and challenge, you could then tell them, I'm not telling this group how many segments, you work it out yourself. But then the ones who are struggling, you may say, okay, I'll give you a clue. It's between 4 and 5. Okay, so you direct them accordingly as part of your stretch and challenge differentiation strategy using the DARTS paradigm within entry level 3. Okay, now at the point where the students are now familiar with the text, what I would like to do with my entry 3s is show those 4 options again, okay? And then I would then say, right, I want you to use annotation. I want you to go through it, work together, or do it by yourself, and any evidence that matches what A is telling you. So if they talk about online shopping, put A next to the sentence or the word. If they talk about it helps people to find family and friends, put B. If it persuades people not to own a phone, put C. If it warns about dangers to health of mobile phones, that's fine. Now, if, for example, the pre-task has already determined before the text has been shown that the way we are taking this discussion is around good and bad things about mobile phones, they may already know it's D, but they're going to find the evidence, okay? So whichever way you actually show this, the way that you approach this is going to be quite powerful, all right? Then get the learners then to identify the evidence. So they should then be able to find all the elements of the D, okay, which is the point D. And then also C, there's no mention of people being persuaded. So therefore it's not C. So C is a distractor. So please, you know, do teach our students the art of finding the obvious distractor and the near distractors that are close to the answers, okay? Because in terms of finding the near distractors, it may well be that there could be 3 points about C and maybe 4 or 5 about D. And that is the way that learners then decide, okay, it's D then, all right? Okay, so So students do, annotation. So this is part of a class. You could use it as a class, but obviously I'll put notes in there to explain bits and pieces. Now, as an alternative, and again, it depends on your stretch and challenge strategy with your students. You can give them a frame like this and help them to scan the text and give them the 4 options, and then they have to write the evidence underneath. They have to write the evidence against each one. So if there's any evidence of benefits of online shopping, they then find it. What you could also do is, do you get your students to signpost to the text? For example, do you get them to say, right, 1 for paragraph 1, or do you say, right, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 5, line 6, line 7? Do you get your learners to actively label a text for signposting purposes? Yes or no? Do you get them to do that? Yes, Josh. Brilliant. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you, Dorette. Brilliant. Because what you could do, they could write in here, they could write line 1, line 2, line 3. Okay? Or they could write the words. It's however which you want to do this, whatever's going to be beneficial to your student. But we want, at the end of the day, by doing these activities, that you want them to get to that answer. Okay, so once learners have identified the main purpose of the text, encourage them to use the same skills to scan other texts to build their resilience. Okay, so they get used to working with different text types, which are going to be important for their, for their functional skills. Now, obviously, the actual texts are going to vary, obviously, in terms of the topics, in terms of the depth, in terms of the context, as they go up the levels. Okay, so they are quite different. So it's important that these kinds of resilience building activities, pre-task, task, and post-task, can actually really help your learners to move forward. So guys, can you now have a little think? I'm just looking at the time as well. Okay, just for 2 minutes, before we have a short break, have a little think about, how you would probably use some of the things I've explained with your students if you were teaching main purpose. Whether you're teaching main purpose level 2, level 1, or entry level. Please let me have your ideas. Let's have a look. Okay, thank you, Dorette. Predicting the topic, it's a brilliant idea, plan to use this. Thank you very much. Yeah, really simple to use, and there's so much benefit. There really, really is. And it just helps to get them thinking right from the off. And also, guys, have you heard of the word metacognition? Metacognition is thinking about thinking. Yeah. How do the learners think? Really important to be able to get them to use thinking. And this is where, prediction can help. Thanks very much, Siobhan. That uses the colored arrows to link different parts to each statement. Thank you, Sabia. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, Josh, my boys could grab a Top Gear mag from the library, find an article, identify the main purpose, explain how they did this to the class, almost a flip. Okay, brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Question here: why do writers write? Why do readers read? Okay, Joe, is that a direct question to me, or are you asking a rhetorical question? Sorry. Are you talking about writers who are professional writers?
No, that's what I asked the students.
No worries. Okay. Right. Verbal discussion to identify text purpose, followed by volunteer examples of evidence, then a write-up. Great stuff, Ross. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for that. It's 1:20, so we'll have another comfort break. Okay. And we'll resume in 5 minutes, guys. Okay. Okay. See you in a bit. Okay, everybody, we will resume the session. So we're going to carry on until 2 o'clock. And as I said, guys, I'm quite happy to stay after 2 o'clock if anyone's got any questions or queries about anything that we've covered so far or anything about the presentation. All right then, guys, can you tell me this now? how do you go about giving feedback on reading to your learners who have entry level 3 skills? How do you go about giving feedback on their reading? It could be their actual reading as they're reading it aloud, or on their scanning technique, skimming, comprehension, understanding. How do you go about doing that? How do you go about giving feedback? Oh, thank you, Joe. That's fine. I understand now. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, very good show. Thank you. Immediate praise as they reading to motivate. Brilliant. Absolutely. And again, it's so important to praise wisely, and support. It can be so encouraging for our learners. Yeah, give tips on how they can improve. Thank you, Kathleen. Once they've read the text for the first time, they are now used to the words. Now ask them to read it again, adding intonation. Very good. I mean, I think intonation, again, the teaching of intonation is very, very powerful for reading, because there you're looking at encouraging them to use the rising and the falling tone of the voice. And ordinarily the tone will go up if there is a question, you know, what is your name? Or maybe it may go up if there is an exclamation mark. I don't believe it. And also with full stops, then you tend to find that the tone will go down. Okay, the actual tone, the actual volume will then go down. Anything else in terms of feedback? Okay, all right, guys. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some handouts really now in terms of looking at other areas of reading and writing development. So more use, basically, where you've got a feedback, which is a two-way dialogue. This is the most helpful. It really is about making sure that the learners actually have some idea of how well they've done and where they need to improve. So that feedback discussion needs to take place in some shape or form, whether it happens actually in live time in the class, or whether it happens when you are doing your round robins and you're going round to each student, or whether it's done in a tutorial session. But so important to be able to, and also to let learners also give you their feedback as well, okay? And you may have some perception of their reading difficulties, but let the learners talk about their difficulties and issues, okay? I mean, I've conducted various funded classroom research projects in the past when I used to work full-time as part of the PLAR, which is the Practitioner-Led Action Research projects that are done through ETF. And I've always, with my research, I've always asked students for their actual opinions about things. And if they say to me in terms of feedback, enough feedback, or it's not clear enough, it's not precise enough, or we don't have any feedback, then that's so important to listen to that, because it's so important for them to be involved in a feedback process. It's really important to involve learners in evaluating what they're doing. So, for them to say, well, that's good, that worked, that didn't work because I found the text quite difficult, quite dense, is not relevant to me. So we really want that kind of feedback. And we want them to read critically. We don't want them to treat a piece of text as something passive. We want them to be questioning, well, who wrote it? Why did they write it? Did they convey a particular message? Where would you find this piece of text? Do you think it did justice to its message or not? Is it clear? Could it have been clearer? Did the use of the captions or the diagrams or the pictures, did they help to understand the text? Okay, so the more critical we can actually encourage our learners to be, the more they will be interacting with the text itself. Okay, and also it's really important to also talk about why is it that people, read, what do they actually read, and also the actual depth of what they're reading, and also whether they find reading challenging or whether they find it quite easy, just to get some idea of their reading awareness. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly just go into another screen and just go into something here. Okay, hopefully I won't go into the full thing, but I think you can see it there in terms of, what constitutes good readers. Okay, so they're able to then, for example, make use of many different kinds of clues. Okay, like clues of meaning, semantics, clues of word order in terms of the syntactic, visual clues, recognizing letter patterns such as "ite," for example, which is the graphic clues, layout clues, graphical clues, and also phonic clues as well. So all these types of clues can also find their way into your teaching, into how you plan your teaching lessons around reading. Now, particularly with entry level, I mean, and with the exam question that we looked at just now, the OCR one, and also we know that there are going to be images that are going to be part of textual information for level 1, level 2 reading. It's so important that we do teach our students visual literacy skills. Okay, this is something that's part and parcel of what I've always done with teaching IELTS and teaching Cambridge exams. Okay, where students, as part of their reading, they have to be, for them to be able to look at charts and graphs and diagrams and cutaways, different kinds of illustrations, maybe some flow charts. Okay, so it's so important that we as well as building their understanding of the words, but also all of the other things that are also part of the text to help them to understand the whole thing, the main purpose, specific aspects of the text, and what is the text trying to achieve, what is its purpose. So do feel free to now, to start to include the teaching of visual literacy. Okay, because that is going to be a really, really important part. Now, again, there's visual literacy everywhere, and that's also very much linked to employability as well. Many different jobs and roles where they are having to not only read instructions or read guidance, which is in a textual form, but it may well be done in a picture format. Okay, I'm not sure whether, guys, you use WikiHow for anything. WikiHow is quite good, because if you want to learn how to plaster a wall, then you can put it in WikiHow. It'll then might give you like 10 different steps, and they've got photographs, okay, or I'd probably call animated like images showing the instructions. So they're pictorial instructions, but they're also in writing. So including some of that in one's teaching to look at instructional language can be quite helpful as well. I'm just looking at the chat just for a second. Just 1 second. Okay, yeah, WikiHow has taught me literally everything I need to know. Thank you, Josh. It's good, isn't it? It's good. It's good. I use WikiHow a lot for functional skills. It's amazing. Everything is there. There are visual diagrams. All right. So you've got the visual literacy included. Then you've got the imperatives. You've got the instructional language in there as well. It's quite nice to read. And learners like how it's all logically sequenced. That helps them to process and understand. So Shirley's saying, I used how stuff works with multivitamins students to encourage writing when they read their, yeah, fantastic, really good. So if there are anything, particularly if you're working with vocational students and anything from their area which are instructional, and this is where in the past, when I've worked full-time in post-16, I've talked to my good colleagues in the vocational department, and just try and get some information, some diagrams, anything instructional that I could just slip in to my classes, into my discrete English classes, that would help them. But it is about making sure that we have a very, very diverse approach as to how we get our learners to read and what clues to look out for. Really important. And also, good readers bring their knowledge to the world to inform their reading. And this is why I am a big, big, big fan of using prediction, using, maybe open questions or func-based questions to just get them to get into their own knowledge, get into their knowledge bank, get into their schematic knowledge. Because that is one thing that we do have in common. And I know there might be so many differences between us as teachers and them as students, is the fact that, we want that Venn diagram overlap in terms of where do we meet the learners. In terms, where we meet them is that we share the same world. We breathe the same air. We access probably the same social media platforms, etc., and all sorts of things. So these are the, any overlap areas where there's shared knowledge, then you can then take your learners on the same journey, because then they then understand a little bit, okay? And again, where it's appropriate, you may want to show some own, your own personal journey, your own personal stories. I mean, for me, where I've taught bachelor students, reading and writing, I'm quite happy to go back to some of the days when I was at school where I really struggled. But what helped me? This was the deficit model. This is what I had. But this is what I did. This is what my teacher taught me. So I'm turning that little story into something that's going to inspire them and give them a willingness and purpose for reading. And particularly if our students love stories on Facebook, Instagram. I mean, on Instagram, you can do Instagram stories. These are really amazing little things that might help the learners. So you want to bring their knowledge in as much as possible. Get them to understand and interact what they're reading. Again, moving backwards and forwards in the text, because tell me about your learners reading. Do you know how they read? In terms of, do they start from the beginning and go all the way down? Do they start with the end and then work the way back up? Do they go in the middle and then they flip, either side? Do they just try to pick out the rich words and then go back to the whole thing? How do your learners read? How do they read? Infrequently. I know, Josh, I know your learners like anything. Just let me have them, mate. Let me work with your learners. Don't worry. I will transform them in front of your eyes. Okay, not very often, Joe's saying. Many of them read one word at a time. They don't have the ability to scan read. Okay, yes, but the thing about, I totally respect what you're saying there, Shirley. The thing is, they're going to have to find a way of trying to use their existing skills to get to the main purpose. So this is what you'd have to figure out. For me, it's building in scanning skills with some of the examples that I showed you. They're always in a rush, and only what they think they need. The thing about being in a rush is they're probably completely overloaded in their conscious mind, which is, again, only 15% of their mind. And sometimes maybe just having a bit of calm, maybe a moment of stillness, everyone's just silent, just get into the zone of the class, and then hopefully you'll have them more minded towards doing more work, and then they can then use their subconscious mind more. They brush over unfamiliar words, etc. So Josh agrees with Shirley. And I think it's a lot of pressure on someone. You need to keep up with other people reading it. The thing is, it is about, I don't know whether guys, have you done any shared reading with your learners? Do you do any group shared reading activities? Do you do any group shared reading where they're reading aloud, but it's a group share? Anyone, yes or no? Group share with reading. Often as possible, Ross? Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Okay. Now, I use this with functional skills and GCSE because I cover GCSE as well. So, and again, I suppose you could do this digitally, I guess, if you're working as a whole group, but definitely face-to-face. So what I would do is I would then have a piece of text, and then I would get I'd get one student to read the first bit, the first sentence or first paragraph, depending on the length of the text. And then the other person would then just recount back what the person read. So they'd kind of summarize it in their own words. All right. And then the third student would read the next bit. The next student would then summarize. So I have a kind of an alternate system of read and discuss. Read and discuss. Okay. That way, everybody, there's a group reading and everyone is getting some kind of understanding. And where students struggle, then what I do is I would butt in between, and say, right, let me read that again. So I demonstrate the reading aloud and get the other person to reread it again. I tend to find that once I read it aloud, it gives them more confidence. I think they just raise the volume a little bit more. Their fluency starts to flow a little bit more. And there's a little bit more comfort in them reading because they've just listened to the teacher read it. Okay. That's okay, Vicky. Thank you. No worries. And yes, absolutely. Also, do any of you give your learners any roles in reading? Do you give them reading roles when you get them to work in groups? Do you give them reading roles? For example, do you get someone who summarizes the introduction? Do you get someone who clarifies any difficult words? Do you get someone who kind of talks about the main purpose? This is the main purpose person. Do you get someone to then summarize the conclusion? Okay, give your students a role. Okay, if you're working in groups, give them a role. This is your role, and then you can alternate it. Then you can also change the text as well. Okay, yes, thank you, Josh. Me and you on the same page, my friend. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, works really well because then everybody is then, you're training your students without them even knowing. Without them even knowing, you are getting them to be able to basically go through all those clues. You may want to give somebody a visual literacy role, right? Any diagrams, or any use of the structure, for example, use of bullet points, headings. You explain those. You will explain the images. You will explain the main purpose. You will explain some of the terminology. All right. And honestly, it works absolutely brilliantly. Everyone's involved. They all change the roles. And what you could do is you can write the roles on a piece of card and they swap the cards in the session. All right. And then you can also, in that particular time, you can then change the text support accordingly. So you are building resilience on the text. Okay. And they're using the same skills in different texts. That's what they're going to have to do eventually as you're funneling them towards the exam. All right. There's no reason why entry-level students can't do that. Dorette, you're saying, I get them to do presentations, others to give feedback. Brilliant. Fantastic. Dorette, is this presentations about what they understand from the reading? So do you get them to verbally recount back from what they've understood when you say presentations, or just in general? Okay. Thanks, Dorette. Brilliant. Brilliant. Now that's challenging for them, but it's very powerful. And also you're using the Feynman technique. Any opportunity for in the group. So you might want to get, I don't know, if they've all looked at the same text, you might get one group to say, well, I want one representative to talk about the main purpose, one about the images, one about that. So you get everyone sharing the feedback. All right. Brilliant. Okay. Please keep letting me have your thoughts, okay? And in terms of, the most impactful strategies for reading, encouragement of fluent oral reading. I'll keep mentioning this. And again, I'm only giving you examples of what's worked for me and what I've heard from other colleagues across the whole education sector. Getting them to to be able to read it out themselves, or listen to someone reading it, not just a teacher, but maybe if any of the texts are audio based, feel free to use audio based texts. Have any of you thought about converting your texts into audios and then converting those into a listening comprehension that you could do on a pre-task, even before you give them the reading to do? Anybody thought? I've done that several times with advanced level EFL students, where I know they're going to struggle with the reading, but they like to listen and they like to tune in and they like to be doing stuff like that before we do the readings. But listening and reading are both receptive language skills. And I tend to find what helps the reading is listening. Listening can empower the reading. Speaking can empower the writing. They're all the skills, the functional skills, skill components, they can all have a reciprocal impact on the other. So tell me, anyone thinking about converting a reading into audio? Okay, I can send some details in a bit, Shirley, about that, but you can do some conversion work. You can convert text into audio, but then you'd have to create your own questions, okay? And that might really work, but you do that in the beginning as your pre-task, because pre-task, you can also do lots of listening work, or, you know, while listening work or while watching video work as well, okay? You could record your voice using software, but it has been using Screencastify. Oh, thank you, Josh, that's amazing. You know, the thing is, the students might really value that they're hearing their teacher's voice. It's a familiar voice. And that might be good. But, you know, do not, even though listening comprehension is not assessed in functional skills, it is assessed on IELTS. It is assessed on, for example, on the Cambridge exams, all right, for the international students. You know, those who are definitely wanting to study universities in the UK, but they have to prove their English is at such a level. Even though it's not, me personally, I'm talking about my experience, I use it all the time with my functional skills GCSE and in terms of skills building, all right? Because I'm skills building forward for their reading, because I know. Screencastify is great. Very good. Well done, Siobhan. Fantastic. That's really good. Thanks for sharing that. Brilliant stuff. Also, there's reciprocal teaching, where pairs of learners take turns to be tutor and student. And this strategy can be effective with adult learners. You can do one-to-one by swapping roles, okay? Because have any of you use a hot seat activity? Hot seating. Anybody use hot seating in their sessions? Yeah, okay. Yeah, basically, now, for hot seating to work, you've really got to make sure that whatever because basically you sit in the hot seat, all right? And then each learner asks you a question, all right? So if it's about a text, all right, say you've asked them to read it, and then they're probably not sure, right? Then what you do is you get them to ask questions. You'd say, oh, Sunil, what is this about? I haven't got a clue. And then you'd explain, you as a teacher, you're in the hot seat, you explain, you know, what it's about. Sunil, what does this word mean? And then you'd explain it. Are there any clever one? Are there any language features in here? And things like that. How is it structured? So if you can train your students to ask these questions, but you would have to be ultra confident with the material before you put yourself in the hot seat, okay? It's called hot seat for a reason. But this is very empowering, all right? Because you're passing the power to the learners. And even entry-level learners could do this, all right? And then they're getting, you know, the teacher is the oracle, but they definitely become the oracle in this particular exercise. So they're getting the answers directly from the teacher, all right? That can be quite powerful. But while you're giving them the answers, you could be encouraging them to write down the answers. So while they're questioning, they're writing. So speaking and writing, reciprocal work, all right? This is really important. Direct saying, if the topic is on how you spent your weekend, each person has the same topic, they present this, the rest of the class get feedback, as will understand what it's about. So no one is put on the spot. This helped me to figure out what each student needs to improve. It could be grammar, sentence construction, using pauses, etc. Oh, well done, Ross. You used for creative writing. Fair play. Very good. Okay. Also, explicit comprehension strategies, accurate phonics teaching, and language experience approaches, whereby, you know, all these things are really, really powerful as well. Okay, guys. Now, any other thoughts and ideas around the teaching of reading and writing? I'm just going to go through. I'm just going to now try and find some examples. Sorry, about reading, rather. Just going to show some activities that you could do to bring them into writing as well. Right, I'm having a bit of a bad Zoom day today. Right, I think I found it. Right, guys. Oh, you know, when I find the text, it then weakens the screen share, and then I have to go back into it. That's not good. Oh, dear. Right, guys, just bear with me. I'm just going to have to stop the share